Good evening. My name is John Martin, and I'm one of the co-moderators for this evening's event. Today, we are having a Kent County virtual forum to discuss the interconnection of race and politics in Delaware. At this time, I would like to introduce my co-moderator, Reverend Pam Connolly.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. You might be asking, what is the purpose of this session? Why are we having it? Why is it so important? And it is important because it is critical for members of our community, the Black and Brown community, to become more engaged in the political process on the local level, the state level, and certainly on the national level. What we hope to accomplish tonight is that we want to inform community and members about how they can participate in the process. We want to activate those community members to also become more engaged and even consider running for an office. We want to encourage members to seek political office and to recognize the importance of their role in politics and how it plays an important role in our everyday lives. Civic engagement, most importantly by participating in the voting process, is critical, particularly in 2020. This evening, we'd like to introduce our panelists that are present at this time this evening. And we do have with us, and they'll have an opportunity as well to introduce themselves in just a couple of minutes. Well, before we do that, we want to acknowledge some of our special partners and sponsors. We want to acknowledge the Reverend Rita Michoud Page for her coordination and leadership, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, the Delaware Faith Registrars, the NAACP Central Dover Branch, the Links Incorporated, the Southern Delaware Alliance for Racial Justice, and the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance. We thank them for their support and involvement, and we hope that this is the first of many sessions to come. We also would like to acknowledge that the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus is not a sponsor of this event, but agreed to support the Voting During COVID-19 presentation. Unfortunately, Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker is unable to join us because of the services for Pastor Lottie Lee, a leader and community advocate in the Wilmington area and throughout Newcastle County. Please keep the family in your prayers. In her stead, Reverend Rita Page will conduct that part of our presentation. We also would like to thank the panelists for their participation. We have with us tonight Danielle Hall, Adi, oh, he's not on yet. We have Dr. Leandra Marshall, Brother Gerald Rocha, Brother Welton Satchel. All right, and we are expecting one more panelist, and hopefully he will be able to join us very soon. We want to, of course, remind everyone that this is a nonpartisan event, and we are not endorsing or supporting any particular candidate or party. We just look forward to a robust conversation. We want our community to take note that we must pay attention to the person, not the party. Be aware of the issues, research the history and track records of candidates, and that we need to be issue driven. With that said, at this point, we'd like to ask each candidate, and we'll start with Danielle Hall, to give a 1 minute introduction of yourselves. Ms. Hall. Please unmute. Oh, I think she might be frozen. She might be frozen, so we'll go to Leandria Marshall, if you would unmute and give your 1 minute introduction.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Reverend Leandra Casson Marshall, and I ran for the Capitol School Board. And in that process, there were many things that I learned that I'm looking forward to talking to all of you about, when that part comes. Just to give you some brief history about me in Delaware, I'm a native Delawarean. Also, I'm currently now a lecturer at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. I'm also Vice President for External Relations and Development at DEMCO. And civic engagement for me is extremely important. I teach American National Government currently. And so for me, this was an exciting opportunity to talk about things that I enjoy and things that I think are important. So
Thank you.
being part of the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Danielle Hall, I think we're ready.
I don't know what happened. I heard you say my name and then everything froze. I was
Right.
the only thing moving, so I wasn't sure. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Danielle Hall. I'm candidate for Lieutenant Governor this year. I have way more than a minute, but I'm going to condense it. I'm a wife, a mother of 10 beautiful children, a businesswoman, a veteran of the United States Air Force, and I'm looking forward to having this very necessary and robust conversation this evening. So thank you for all that went into putting this wonderful evening together.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mr. Gerald Rocha.
Good evening, and thank you for having me on this forum. My name is Gerald Rocha, and I was a candidate for the 1st District City Council and was successful and am installed now, and I've been, already jumping in feet first doing the work. But anyway, I'm originally from Long Island, New York. I come to Dover, Delaware by way of the United States Air Force. I am retired after 20 years of honorable service. I currently work for United Way of Delaware as Director of Philanthropy and Engagement. I have a heart for the community. I've worked throughout the state and in southeastern Pennsylvania, and I'm looking forward to the conversation this evening. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Mr. Welton Satchel. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Welton Satchel. I'm running for 3rd District Levy Court here in Kent County. Born Delawarean from the southern part of the state in Sussex County. Lived here in Kent County for 11 years. First time running for office, part in many organizations in our community, and I'm just looking forward to the dialogue this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Again, thank you all for being here with us tonight. We will go ahead now then and move forward to our next part of tonight's program, which is voter education. Some really important information that will be presented to us by Reverend Rita Page. Reverend Page.
Good evening, everyone. As we would say in church, this is a be ye also ready moment for me, standing in for Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker at the very last minute, but I am honored to do so. So when we talk about voter education, I want to talk about reasons to vote, reasons to register, and reasons to vote. One, it's your voice. Then we need to vote if we want to help create change, be a part of change. Then elected officials pay attention to voters. A lot of times if you want to bring something to their attention and you're not a registered voter, they know that they can't get a vote out of you, a possible vote, then chances are they really aren't going to listen to you. Then there's to help change corruption in the voting system. And we want you to know that your vote counts. And you can help make change, especially in the areas, issues that you are concerned about, especially in the areas, maybe gun control, police brutality, education, restoring the felon rights to vote. And let me, many people don't know that in Delaware that their voting rights have been restored. Former Governor Jack Markell signed that bill into law July 13, 2016. And, you know, I'm proud to say that there were those of us, several of us, especially from IMA, and as well as Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker and a few others who spoke out down at Legislative Hall. So if we weren't registered voters, we wouldn't have been heard. Repeal of the death penalty, the same thing. Okay, we know that it may come back up, but for right now, we've kept it away. And the Inspire Scholarship at Delaware State University getting an extra year, you know, that started with those of us who are registered to vote who spoke out. Adding race as a protected class to the Delaware Constitution. I didn't know that one myself until this summer when asked to speak out on that. The Delaware Legislative Black Caucus held a session over at Del Tech, and they had the Camden 22, as well as myself and others, to come and speak to the legislature to get them to vote to add race as a protected class, as well as the ban on chokeholds. And all those bills passed. There are women's issues, programs and services for young people, housing, taxes, health and medical issues, jobs, transportation, raising minimum wage, our jail situation, prison situation, funding for HBCUs are all determined by who's in office and our vote. So our votes count. The food stamp program and other social services, religious rights. And you know, women fought for women's right to vote during the women's suffrage. And then John Lewis and the civil rights movement, where Lewis was beaten and sustained a cracked skull on the Edmund Pettus Bridge on March 7th, 1965. And when researching Edmund Pettus, I found out that he was a former US Senator, a Confederate general, and a KKK leader. And so the bridge project that's going out now to rename the bridge out of John Lewis, after John Lewis, that's important because it's now named after a KKK leader who was a supremacist and his family owned slaves. What we do today impacts tomorrow. And all these issues depend on our vote. If you don't vote, you don't have the right to complain. No vote, no voice. No voice, no power. Our power is in the vote. If you are registered to vote, contact the Department of Elections at 302-739-4498 to request an absentee ballot. That's going to be very important this year, to vote by absentee. October 30th is the deadline. You may also visit ivote.de.gov to request an absentee ballot or to vote by mail. October 10th is the last day to register to vote. November 3rd is election day. What are the qualifications for registering to vote? Be a US citizen, a Delaware resident, have a valid ID, be 18 years of age or 17, and will be 18 by the general election date. Where to register? There are many places that you can register. Kent County Department of Elections, ivote.de.gov. There are many community-based organizations who have organized voter registration teams. You have Delaware Faith Registrars, you have the Central Branch and NAACP, you have Dover Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Inc., Dover Chapter of the Links Incorporated, the League of Women Voters, and you can go on their website, www.voted.org. www.vote411.org, Zeta Rho Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and many, many others. Those are just a few. You need to know where you vote. Look on your polling card, because the Department of Elections should send you a polling card, and it will tell you your polling place. Also, I was helping someone do the affidavit today, the request for a ballot, and I noticed that it had his name already on it and his polling place. So he's already registered. So that affidavit should also do that as well. You can also contact again ivote.de.gov online. And sometimes I just put in, where do I vote, when I'm trying to help people. And the Delaware Kent County Department of Elections, the website will come up and you can put in your information, the address, search like that. And Representative Walker, also says that recognizing modern day Jim Crow practices at play is a reason for us to register to vote. And then we have problems with moving polling places days before the election. Not granting registered Democrats and Republicans the opportunity to vote in the primary for their voter registration was changed to independent without their knowledge. So that's something that we need to stay on top of. And it says, don't leave the polling place without completing a provisional ballot if you're told that you're not permitted to cast your ballot at the polls for whatever reason. And then revisit the website, ivote.de.gov, to ensure that your ballot was entered into the system and was counted. Let us work with community partners to ensure that there is a coordinated effort to get souls to the polls. Remember, your vote is your voice.
Thank you, Reverend Page, for that important information. And certainly we do know that our vote is our voice. We're glad that Brother Adi Kufariji, did I get that correct? Has now.
Yes, you did.
Oh, they told me beforehand, so. But he has joined us, thank goodness. And so we want to give you an opportunity as well to go ahead and introduce yourself. You have 1 minute to let us know who you are.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you very much for allowing me to be on with you tonight. So the ladies and gentlemen present, thank you. Good evening. My name is, I'll give you my full name, Adewumi Kuforiji, but most people around here know me as Ade. I'm a resident of Kent County. I've been in Kent County for 32, going on 33 years. I'm a graduate. I have an accounting degree from Wesley College and a master's in business administration from Delaware State College, now university. I'm in my 28th year of working in the state of Delaware, in state government, mostly in finance, and I work in one of the local school districts, Capital School District. So I'm the chief financial officer and currently the interim assistant superintendent. I'm running for state representative in the 34th district. And so on November 3rd, please get out there and vote. I'm running strictly to make sure that I'm a voice for people that don't have a voice. First, for workers, to make sure that workers have support when decisions are being made around employment. I'm running also to make sure that I'm a voice for people that don't have anybody representing them. So I'm the special interest guy for normal, everyday people, and it doesn't cost a dime for me to support people, like people's activities. Anything that would affect everyday people, I want to make sure that I'm a supporter of. I support educators. I'm highly behind all the hard work that educators around the state are doing, and I think one of my major goals is to remove obstacles from the way of educators so they can truly educate our children. Again, I want to make sure that I speak for, healthcare, for our infants, for our children, for our seniors. Again, just being a voice for those that don't have a voice at the table. So when that somebody is standing up and speaking up for the people that don't have anyone speaking for them. As Reverend Page mentioned, there's so many possible legislations that will be coming up in the next couple of years in the next General Assembly. And it's important for people to make sure that they have somebody at the table speaking for them, not people that say they will speak for you, but you really don't know what they're doing when they're in those back rooms. But someone that actually will be there and would open his mouth and speak up and say, yes, this is important. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. We're ready to get into our first question. It'll be the same question for all the panelists. And we can again go in alphabetical order, and you'll have about 2 to 3 minutes to give your response. And here's the question. A recent Washington Post article stated, race has been a defining issue in American politics since before the country formally came into existence, a dividing line marked by generations of struggle and conflict. Today, the issue is back at the center of the national debate. In 2 to 3 minutes, can you share with our audience how this statement is relevant to the African American community in Kent County? Please provide examples as you explain. And I can reread it as we go along. So we'll start with Ms. Danielle Hall.
First on the podium, thank you for that wonderful question. Politics has always been a measure of who gets what and how much. And so I think that has not lost its relevance throughout the years. I think it's probably become more apparent in recent years, especially in light of all of the racial discord in our country over the last couple of years, and in particular this year. I think that probably for the first time in several decades, some people are wide awake politically and recognize that once they put down their signs of protest, that they needed to have their voices heard at the ballot box. And so I find that a lot of people are asking very pointed questions about what we can do to really be impactful from the legislative and the policy side. And so one of the things that I frequently talk about is marginalized communities. Those are the communities that are often forgotten or overlooked. And I think that when it comes to racial divide, we see that the socioeconomic impact to communities of color are affected much more disproportionately in those communities. And so in order for us to really effectively have our voices heard, it's really very important that we have representation that is reflective of those communities. So if you have people who have been career politicians, I spoke the other evening about perspective. I'm a general contractor and I was 50 feet in the air in Middletown the other day. And as I looked out across the lay of the land in Middletown, I thought about other environments that I've been 50 feet above. And if you're up high and not down low with boots on the ground and walking in these communities, how can you effectively represent those interests of those communities who are hurting, who have been overlooked and often forgotten if you can't relate to those experiences? So having people like me who are willing to come out and say, hey, I've been hurt by this particular policy, or I have found successes in this one and we need to see more of those. That's where we really get the best bang for our buck, when we can get fair and accurate representation in the legislative body. We need to talk about things in the judicial system. We need to see more people who have cultural competence to really be able to articulate the truth to the powers that be about the things that we need. So I think I'm probably at my 2 minutes. I'm not going to belabor the point. I'll pass the baton to the next person.
So Reverend Connolly, are you selecting the panelists from your view? It appears she may have been muted. So Reverend Connolly,
All the panelists have the same question.
Yes. Ask them, maybe they might want you to restate it if they.
Okay, I put it in the chat. It looks like she's frozen. So can we go to Adi?
Yes. So I agree with what most of the things Ms. Hall said. So not to repeat the same things, but what is really important, I think, yes, is an understanding of our communities, and that our communities themselves need to see this process. A couple of things, talking about career politicians, they've sometimes been there for so long that they may have lost touch with what's going on in today's world. So reality is kind of a little bit far from them, but it doesn't help that we keep voting for the same people over and over. I always see, and everybody always talks about, term limits, especially in Congress, in local legislature. And I'm like, yeah, every election day is term limit day. That's the day we make a choice to send everybody back home so they can enjoy things at home and learn what normal people deal with. I think that's one of the advantages I think this group brings, is the idea that some of us running for office, we live normal lives. I don't think everybody is a millionaire, so we understand everyday people's struggles, that sometimes when those guys reach some of those levels and they've been there 30, 40 years, they really don't even understand what a struggle is. And in terms of, and it totally affects divide, and we see what it causes in the racial divide that we currently experience. So to Ms. Hall's point, we absolutely want to get out. We want to make sure that we're looking and supporting people that do look like us, because we understand where things are, we understand where we've been, and it's nice that some of us know where we've been, and we don't forget, and then all of a sudden join the group of people that don't have any remembrance that, hey, there was a time I needed help. Sometimes people sit there and they just are like, oh yeah, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, I gotta have bootstraps first before I can pick myself up. I think I stole that from somebody. I don't know if it was Mr. John Lewis or somebody that says, yeah, or MLK that said, yeah, before you tell a man to pick himself up, at least he needs to have a bootstrap to even pull up. So, and that's one of the things. I'm a people guy, and that's one of the biggest reasons I'm out here running. It's not because I need an extra thing to do, but it's because I see that people are not getting the opportunity, the fair chance that we need to have. So, and again, it's totally racial in terms of that we tend to be disproportionately affected by the systems that are already in place. And sometimes all people don't know that they have a system in place, but they do. Hey, what's wrong? You just go to the bank and do this. Except, yeah, it's funny that, certain people, when we look a certain way, we don't get the same opportunities, or we don't get the same interest rate that some of the other people get at the same exact level in life. So I think, it would be great if our community gets out and make sure that, they let some of us represent them correctly.
Thank you, Adi. And Reverend Connolly, if I may, just as a means of courtesy to every panelist, remind them that we have a short window and it will end. And we've got a few topics we're going to discuss. So if you could, shoot for 2 minutes, no more than 3. I'll give a little high sign. Look for my thumb if you get to 2 minutes, and look for me to come out there like Sandman with the hook if you get to 3.
Oh, we hope you don't have to. We hope you don't have to do that. Reverend Leandra Marshall, you're next. Same question.
Okay, great. That's okay. Well, I'm gonna be brief, 2 minutes. But there are 2 things that I just want to put out here that I think are extremely important. One is that I think we need to have a Black agenda. What do I mean by a Black agenda? Yes, we need to vote, but after we vote, then what's the next step? What's the next step? So I think there needs to be issues that we mobilize around, but I think that for me, one of the things that I learned and that I think is important is that before we can unite with other groups, we have to decide what are those 2, 3, 4 things that we want to achieve in our own communities. Because one of the things that we do is that we try to tackle a whole lot of things, okay? And then we end up not achieving the goals that that we really need to take care of. So in my opinion, when I think of that question, I think of this book that I read, Politics Among Nations, and it's written by Hans Morgenthau. And what he says is that politics is a struggle for power. And so Danya alluded to that. But when we look at politics, is who gets what, but we have to know what we're fighting for. And I think that is one of the biggest problems. We don't sit down and actually as community leaders and say, this is our 2-year plan. This is our 3-year plan. These are the issues that we have to address right then, and then develop a strategy around that. And I know I only got 2 minutes, and I'm looking at John, but I think one of the biggest things that we got to make sure that we do is that once we identify those issues, then we need to say, okay, if it's an issue that deals with real estate, then we need the recorder of deeds. We need to make sure that the next time around we have someone, a person of color that's like-minded with the agenda, that says, that's in that particular, that runs for that particular office. If we need someone, another mayor, or we need another levy court person to achieve whatever our agenda states, then we should be more targeted. Because what's happening is that we vote, and then that's the end of it. We're not on any committees or anything like that. So I just wanted to make sure that you focus on developing a Black agenda and then a strategy afterwards to achieve the agenda.
I just wanted to do a quick follow-up. But first of all, everyone has been remarkable. Just quick follow-up in 30 seconds or less. What's one thing that you would put on the agenda if you had those leaders sitting at your table?
One of the things I'm really interested now is the notion of qualified immunity. I'm really concerned about, police brutality and the fact of people the police not being held accountable. And so I want to look at areas in which we can work with the police department, because there are areas where we can work with community policing, but I think there also has to be some serious discussion about those kinds of topics. Okay, and I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Back to you, Reverend Connolly.
Thank you, Reverend Marshall. All right, Mr. Rocha, same question. Do you need to?
Thank you. I'm just going to continue that conversation. That seems like it's going in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. The agenda piece is definitely needed. I know I've been in Dover for over 22 years, and it's hard. It seems like there's a lot of organizations out there doing great work, but it would be even enhanced better if we all came together, like Reverend Marshall said, and put forth one agenda. And there are models that are out there. I know when I was working in the community in the mid 2000s, like 2005, 2006, we had a strategic framework called Communities That Care. And although it addressed risk factors for youth, you could still use the framework in any situation. So what I would recommend is that we put that framework back in order and get a collective group of not only just leaders, but also participants that are willing to work in the community and really, educating ourselves on what's going on in local government, what the needs are in the community, and not just looking at just downtown, but all of the other housing areas throughout our city. What I proposed to City Council at my first City Council meeting was to bring resources to neighborhoods downtown. And basically, Weldon Satchel was with me when we walked downtown and was actually having engaged in conversations with families that were down there, and they were telling us what they could use and need downtown. So I know that due to COVID and the way education is going on right now in the schools, these families are struggling with helping their students or children with their homework. So being that I am working for United Way of Delaware and know where the resources are, I know there's a resource called 211 Press 4 for homework help and more. And we're getting some palm cards made up, and I've invited the city council to go with me downtown and other neighborhoods throughout, just hand these cards out and to begin that conversation piece. Just use this opportunity as a conversation piece to learn more about, through their lens, how our citizens are seeing things and what they need in our community. And but in the meantime, we should galvanize ourselves and come together and put forth a strategy that we could use. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Certainly, wonderful, thank you. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Satchel, the same question.
All the panelists are correct in what they're saying. Sometimes I believe that we are limited. We limit ourselves to certain things, and we don't sort of think outside the box. Sometimes a person that lives, unless you know what I've been through, how can you understand me? You have to walk in that person's shoes to understand. And I think you're out of touch because we're not going out there and we're not listening to the concerns of the people in the community. And that's one of my big principles of why I'm running, because sometimes we don't know unless we're in that environment, and people feel like they're ignored. If you're told the only education as far as bettering yourself is a high school education, and you don't think that you can go forth and go to college because my family, we only make this much or so much that we can't afford to put our child through college. You're limiting yourself, and we need to do better when it comes to people in our community, because we got some bright young Black people here, and they're limited, and we've been being limited to how far we can go in life. You're told that you work in a manufacturing plant, that's all you're good for. I disagree with that. So we do need to come together. We do need to be more engaged in the community and see what, understand how they feel. You look downtown, just like Councilman was saying earlier, people have general concerns about their community, and they want to be heard. They need to be heard. And how are we going to know the correct steps to go about bettering our community if we don't go down into the community, into our community, to find out what these people need help with? So I agree with all the panelists. It's time for change. And having a person of color in an elected office, that shows that we've come a long way. Years ago, person of color couldn't run for office. Now we can. Years ago, we couldn't vote. Now we can. So I believe that we need to think outside the box, stay more in tune with the community, because their voices want to be heard, and we need to listen.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that very much. We're going to switch lanes here. We're going to go into a topic that's really right up my bailiwick, and that's education. A little fun fact. Delaware teachers and school leaders in the workforce is much less diverse than the student population. White is the largest single racial demographic group for students, teachers, and principals in the 2016-2017 school year, and still persists. More than half of Delaware students are students of color. In fact, in Kent County, in the Capital School District, over 60% students are Black and brown. Compare that to us having only 1 in 4 of our principals are people of color, and 1 in 7 are people of color. That is a hot button topic, especially with race being an issue. How do you all find yourselves being able to work to help address that issue, situation, bring light to it, and look for a solution? We're going to go right back to, since the camera was on you, Mr. Satchel. We're going to do a serpentine look and go backwards from last names as opposed to from the A's. Mr. Satchel. Y'all, you may have muted yourself.
Can you repeat that just one more time for me?
Check this out. So I gave you a little bit of a background, but there's an issue, okay? There is disparity. The students in Delaware, there are lots of students of color, yet there's a disparity. Overwhelmingly, the leadership and the teachers are not people of color. And so studies have shown that students learn better, research shows they learn better when they have opportunities to interact with teachers and leaders of color. It's a tough issue. How would you bring light to that issue? And do you have some sort of a solution to that challenge?
I think we need to hire more teachers of color. I grew up down south, and most of my teachers were white. And sometimes they look at your background and where you come from, and they can't identify it. They can't identify with it. And you get a teacher of color, they can almost identify with the student what they're going through. And the student seems to respond a little better versus someone that's not of color. I think we do need to hire more teachers of color and try to get students more comfortable. I believe the teachers are out there, they're just not here. And I think even with teachers of color dealing with a student of color, they'll push them more than a teacher that not of your race. And that's all I got.
Hey, thank you for that. And I appreciate you stepping out there to answer that question. It's a tough one because it's one of those things that people find it uncomfortable to discuss. Mr. Rocha, there is a disparity. Overwhelmingly, the leaders and teachers of color are far fewer than their white counterparts. Let me just ask you, do you see that as an issue? And if so, how would you address it?
Well, that's an issue probably throughout the nation. And I don't know if there's enough African-American teachers to pull from currently to fill the need in, let's say urban communities, because I worked 6 years up in Chester, Pennsylvania, and, that was an issue. Even though, there was a mix of teachers, it was hard. There was a lot of turnover and stuff like that. But I seem to think that if there was more like a cultural sort of training for all teachers, that we could minimize the effect of our students when it comes to learning. Learning, it just seems to be, number one, white teachers seem to think that they cannot teach Black students, Black or brown students, because they feel as though they cannot connect with our Black or brown students. Then there should be some training to teach them to get, to work on their maybe cultural biases and stuff like that. Because, being able to just say, let's go out and recruit more Black teachers, I think it's a little bit more to it than that. And, that would be great. But I think that, in the meantime, some professional development needs to be taking place. And some, I think that, you know, because even with teachers that I worked with when I was in Chester, I would pull them to the side and say, just don't think that because you're white that they won't trust you and they won't want to learn from you. You know, you just have to work on and being open to connect, because children are children. And if you're, you know, if you're empathetic and you actually connect and build relationships with your students, I don't believe it matters what color. Most of us probably didn't have Black teachers. You know, my first Black teacher was in like 7th grade. So I went all through elementary school without a Black teacher, and I still learned. So I can't necessarily say that it's an excuse for not having education or the lack of, and I do understand that having a Black teacher, I might feel more comfortable in the classroom, but I don't use it as an excuse. And I think that if, you know, we, you know, gave cultural training with our teachers that are currently teaching to get them to understand what it's like and how our children might react in certain situations, I think, and the fact that we build relationships with children, I think we can overcome a lot of that disparity that we have right there today.
Thank you for that. Mr. Kufariji, the question comes to you. There's a disparity. Is it an issue? Should there be a way to address it? And have you thought about it? Do you have a plan?
So, thank you for that question. I think, yes, I think there's a disparity. Well, I think I need to just take it from the perspective that it takes time to develop teachers. You know, I just can't go outside and pick off 5 teachers and make them, you know, 4 or 5 Black African American students and turn them into educators overnight. So there's a systems issue. We have a systems issue is what I think is causing the shortage. For ourselves as a community, to emphasize the importance of education, because sometimes I don't think, and I don't think the larger community is helpful, you know, especially when you look at entertainers, you look at, you know, basketball players, kids want to aspire to be those things. Nobody really says that, oh, a teacher is a really, really important person in my life. We need teachers. Teachers make the rest of us, really. So as a result of that, our kids are trying to be all these other things that people say are success, but they don't realize the importance of teachers as being the reason everyone else in the world is successful. So making sure that we start to emphasize the importance of education and the value that teachers bring in that space. And when I go talk about systems, we need to think of recruitment, being able to go out to places that may have a larger population of African American students. So UMES, for example, would be one local one that's close enough. It's not really local, but it's close outside of Del State. So if Del State is able to generate, and I know we've tried to do some partnerships with our local colleges to make sure that we have students and have incentives for those students to want to come into education. You know, sometimes, you know, the organizations that say, oh yeah, if you come teach in this community, we will pay you $5,000 more, you know. So being able to draw funds to maybe attract recruits to say, hey, if you want, you know, high school students, hey, by the way, if you sign up to be an educator, to be a teacher, you know, there's this opportunity for you. There's maybe we can offer you scholarships. Hey, your education can be covered for free or 50%, or some incentive that makes them say, oh man, education might be a place I want to try. You know, we can get them that way. And then we as educators, as we go out and do recruitment, to make sure that we reach out to those other schools and institutions that may be predominantly African American, and sometimes we may go beyond our 4 walls, you know, Delaware, Maryland. We may even stretch, you know, maybe a little further south to find people. But part of that system, though, is being able to say have the salary structures that's able to attract them. Because why would I leave, you know, Atlanta? Why would I leave North Carolina if I'm going to make more money than I'm going to leave Atlanta and then come all the way to Delaware, and you're paying me less than what I'm making in Atlanta. It wouldn't make sense for them. And that may be part of the reasons we may see the shortages. So there's a large systems issues that's involved that we probably need to chip at. But definitely, I think for our students to recognize the importance of teachers. And to Mr. Rocha's point, yes, definitely other teachers can reach our kids while we work through increasing the number of our teachers, but at the same time, yes, they can be successful with our students. Thank you.
Look, thank you. Looks like you mentioned that it's going to come down to dollars and common sense. All right, we're going to come to you, Ms. Hall. There is a disparity. What are your thoughts about it? Is it an issue? And if so, do you have a plan to try to address it? And
she looked disappointed that you skipped
I
her.
thought I was next. Just following his.
I'm sorry. So let me just say this. I went by Casson.
Okay. It's all good. I'll let her go. I'll round it out at the end.
Okay. All right. Credited to the head, not the heart.
No problem at all. But this is something that I'm extremely passionate about, because I think money is an issue, and I think that teachers need to be qualified. But I think we're missing something that I think is even more important, in my opinion. And let me just give a real quick reason why I feel this way. When I was a substitute teacher in Capital School District, working in Central Middle School, there were teachers that were so bogged down with trying to pass the praxis, and these were good teachers that were excellent in the classroom, that did an excellent job in terms of their paperwork and their competence when it came to teaching in the class, but they were bogged down with trying to pass this praxis. So one of my issues that I really that I want to get out here, that I think is really important in education, is that I think that it's gone too far with all of these, and I call them steps to keep people of color out. Okay, just to be real frank. Number one is constant testing, praxis testing, and even testing that's not even in the person's field, but they're constantly having to pay for these tests. And then there's an arbitrary number that they have to make sure that they reach. And I've seen people and students, and I've had students that were able to do a great job in terms of passing these tests, but were lousy teachers. And so I think we need to begin to look at that whole structure of how, not just recruit, but what are the qualifications for good teachers? And it's not all that they can always just pass. I'm going to teach history, because I keep thinking about this teacher that I know. I'm going to teach history, but I can't teach history anymore. I got to be a substitute because I couldn't pass something in algebra or something a little higher in plane geometry. So for me, I think we need to look at the structure, this accountability, because I think it's going off the rails. And what has happened is that, we've really replaced all this paperwork, and some of the teachers that should be teachers, they just decide to go somewhere else. I have students that would have been great teachers, but because of the praxis, and then this, and not just the praxis, you got praxis 1, then you got praxis 2, and then you got all this other stuff. They just said, well, I'm gonna just go to another, another whole profession. So I think that this needs to be overhauled. I'm gonna be honest with you. And they keep tweaking it, making changes, but I just don't think it's been enough changes in terms of accountability. So the question, I guess my comment would be that's where I think we need to begin to look and really start making some decisions in that way, and then follow up with recruitment once we've changed some of these criteria and laws that keep people of color out. That's just my perspective.
Look, thank you for that. So far, everyone has had a great deal of passion. All right, our candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Same
Thank you,
question from partner, your vantage point.
My sister preached a sermon from the mount just there. There's nothing, that was a mic drop for me. I loved it. Thank you, Leandra. So most of the perspectives that I would say that I would have approach from have already been articulated. I kind of like to talk a little bit from the consumer side. With 10 children and my children having went through the public education sector, and I'm also a graduate of Cesar Rodney High School. And I know you guys are in Dover High, so don't be hating on me, okay? I love y'all.
CR, go Riders.
It's all good. But, you know, I've seen some pretty interesting dynamics from when I went through school. I think Brother Gerald articulated it the best that, you know, it wasn't until much later on in my education, probably junior high or high school, where I saw my first Black teacher. And those teachers that poured into me, those are the teachers that made a difference. And so probably looking at my own education experience and then looking at my children, I have 6 girls and 4 boys. And, you know, my daughters have had a completely different education experience than my sons. So they've had a much easier time going through. There wasn't as much friction with the girls and the teachers as there were with my boys. My oldest son, I can remember him being in 2nd and 3rd grade, walking from my house down to the end of the block to go to school. The kids picked on him relentlessly, called him a teacher's pet, and he was a straight A student. And I think, you know, just the peer pressure itself kind of made him feel like it was a bad thing to be a straight A student. And then, you know, you move on into some of the studies where you see the bias in the teachers, and you know, especially where our young men are concerned, more often you see a disproportionate situation where if there's an infraction in the school classroom rules, the young Black boys are evicted from the classroom, expelled, suspended, you know, for the same infractions that their white counterparts are not experiencing. And so, you know, that school to prison pipeline, and somebody has even brought it to my attention, I think Sister Alicia Clark made mention that it's more a cradle to college syndrome now. You know, we have a continuum that we have to really start looking at under a microscope, because these kids are falling apart academically. I see the academic achievement gap continuing to widen. And so, you know, I want to be able to see whoever is currently teaching, to Gerald's point, you know, they need to have that cultural competence. And so, you know, we have to have some training that creates those good relationships between the students and the teachers that are instructing them, so they can be successful. And while we're developing that bench and getting the incentives in place to be able to bring more teachers of color to the workplace, you know, we can manage that as well. I'd also like to say that, you know, from a policy standpoint, I think that for the amount of money that the state of Delaware spends per child, that is not making it into the hands of the teachers and in the classroom. I think that, you know, we ought to kind of reevaluate where we are on teacher salaries as well, because I think that even from my own experience, I think maybe 1 or 2 of my classmates went on to be educators. So, you know, what is it about this situation that doesn't incentivize or is actually a turnoff to children as they're going through the education system to incentivize them to want to be teachers? I mean, in a lot of situations, you hear how the teachers are having mayhem and free-for-alls inside of their classroom where there's no control. So, you know, those are things that to me would be a disincentive to a child growing up saying, I don't want to be a school teacher because look what they go through. So I think, you know, again, we have to work at the strategies of creating a classroom environment that's conducive to learning, and that interconnectedness that you spoke about with between the child and the student. I'm sorry, the child and the teacher.
But
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for it. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Reverend Connolly. And we're going to we're going to ask, because we've got a few more topics. Um, Although, to be honest with you, less is more. If we do a deeper dive into just a few things, I mean that's okay too. Wouldn't you all agree? But if we could, we're gonna for the next round, we're gonna turn it over to Reverend Connolly, and we're gonna shoot for two.
All right, so here's the next topic. It's about health. Um, and of course, we know we're in the middle of this coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic. And this has exposed the disproportionate high rates of health disparities in Delaware. I looked at the My Healthy Community website yesterday, and I found this information just as a backdrop. When we look at the total persons tested by race and ethnicity in Kent County, non-Hispanic white, 13,600. Non-Hispanic Black, 7,300. When we look at the the rate of cases per 10,000 people in Kent County, non-Hispanic Black, 216.1 versus 102.4, almost double for white. And then when we look at the deaths, for Kent County, non-Hispanic white 69 and non-Hispanic Black 43, although we make up about 23% of the population in the state. So we'll start with, let's see here. Brother Welton, what are your thoughts? How do we fix this disparity? What do we do? What's some things that we can do? And we know that COVID is just one health issue, but it's one that's in the forefront right now. But what are some suggestions or thoughts that you have around this topic?
Can you repeat that one more time for me? I can hear.
Talking about the health disparity in our state based on race, and what are your thoughts? What are some things that we can do to change the statistics? What can we do?
That's a toughie.
Or maybe what are the questions we should be asking those in public service or in office to do to help us to make the change?
I think we need to probably study more as far as what we're dealing with and how can we, what's the good course of action on how to deal with it. I mean, the coronavirus obviously is something that we've never dealt with before. And I think we need to actually come up with Can you guys hear me? Because I cannot hear you guys right now. I can't.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
And I think we need to come up with, I say, a task force that is equipped to handling like the coronavirus in the future. We need to ask our legislators, even the county, to come up with some type of task force to help how to specialize that, how to deal with these issues when they arise. So I would say to be more prepared when certain things like this does happen. We were caught off guard. We didn't know how to handle it. And we were learning day by day how to deal with this and how to keep it at bay. I think we need to come up with, I was in Annapolis, Maryland, a few months back, and there was a program called CERTS, which was like a natural disaster and ambassador committee that was strictly for things as the coronavirus, things such as even tornadoes, anything of that nature, how to, when something like this happened, they will come in and they will assist. And I think we do need some type of task force just like that. So the next time that if we ever, God forbid, have to deal with something of this nature, we have people put in place that specialize on how to deal with these types of situations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I want to add a twist to it and ask Mr. Rocha. I was also doing some research and indicated, we know that now the state has set up some, I believe it's 19 more permanent testing sites, including Walgreens drugstores. But there is some concern in some communities that the Walgreens testing sites are only drive up. If you don't live near Walgreens, how do you get there and get tested? And there's a concern that in communities, we want to maintain some of the community testing sites, which are more in the neighborhoods, which have been churches or community centers, where people maybe even feel more comfortable going in that setting. What are your thoughts about that?
Those are some great points. Great points. I actually had a scare last week where someone that, even though I wear my mask everywhere I go, but I just happened to ride in the car with someone that was showing me around as city council, learning about the city and stuff like that. And the next day that person developed a fever. And so, I got the call right away, and I, immediately, because I'm a veteran, I called the VA. And the VA actually gave erroneous information. They told me that, Rite Aid and CVS were doing testing. So I called CVS because that's closest to my house. And CVS said they're not doing testing in the state of Delaware. I guess in other states they might be, but not here. So, she told me to call Walgreens. So when I called the Walgreens that's near my house, that particular Walgreens did not do the testing there. I had to go to State Street to get it tested. And yes, it was a drive-through. So I could see how, of course, the Walgreens, I'll use the one near my house as an example, which is on the corner of Forest Avenue and what's that, Salisbury Road or Denny's, Salisbury Road, I'll call it.
Right.
So, if I was living downtown and I wanted to try and get tested and I went and walked there, which is in walking distance, I'd be turned around because they're not doing the testing. I know Reverend Page has done a great job with connecting the churches with the state and the National Guard to be able to get testing done. And, I think we need to do more or a better job of bringing the resources to the communities in which we serve, because transportation is a big issue. But first and foremost, we need to ensure that people understand that the best way to combat this disease is by wearing a mask. When I was working with the NAACP to do voter registration downtown on Lockerman Street, we had boxes of masks in there. If anybody came in to register and they didn't have a mask, we would provide them one. Well, just standing out on the sidewalk trying to usher people in, I would see people just going up and down the street without a mask, and I began to start handing them out to them. So, and the masks are not cheap. Sometimes you can't find just like a 5-pack of masks or a 10-pack of masks. You got to spend that $30 to get a 50, pack of masks. And that's quite a bit of money to be doing that. So, you know, I think if we made sure that our community had a mask to wear, or, you know, just checking around and, you know, seeing what the landscape is like, and then bringing the more testing we can start doing in the communities that may not be getting the testing, I think we could dramatically change that health disparity right here in Kent County.
Thanks so much. And there's a question in the chat. So Adi, I'm gonna direct this one to you, and this will be our last piece on health. The question or the comment says the disparities we see during COVID-19 are exacerbated by the regular health disparities in Delaware. How can we use social determinants and other factors to help us to start to right set the disparities, not just during COVID, but at any time in the state?
Yeah, so great question. I saw the question too. So I think one of the issues that we need to look at, or maybe present to the state, is how they market the health resources that are available. I think there's some resources available. The issue might be how it's marketed, especially to our community, where people don't know that, oh, I can get these services, I can get some preventative services in my community. And the state, you know, and I work for the state, so I'll say sometimes we as a state, sometimes we don't do a good job marketing the services that we offer. And that causes a big problem. So one of the biggest things I think we need to do is help people know that we have services available. How can they access, give them the ability to access those services? And to your point around, you know, the distances to those facilities sometimes is a problem. The acquisition of, you know, I know back in the day, I don't know if they still have this, you know, they used to do drive-by mammogram tests. That's a great example of where that system works well. And we need to introduce that maybe for some of the other areas where, you know, they can have a health drive-by and say, today we'll be at Capitol Green, or today we'll be on Cockwood Street, and we'll be testing for ABC or whatever could be a problem at the moment. And then the other thing I look at is promoting wellness. You know, it's better to stay healthy than to try and recover from an event. And as a community, we need also to be able to, you know, have access to wellness services, you know, where, you know, we get information about, oh, do you know that if I eat so many donuts a day, it does generate migraine headaches? So maybe I did stop eating 10 donuts a day. Maybe just have one if you gotta have a donut. Those types of things are important. You know, somebody said to me one day, like, hey, I only got one body, so I got to take care of it. So if I want it to last long, and that's important. Back in the day, we did the tobacco and alcohol, disclaimers like, you know, smoking may be dangerous to your health. Maybe we need those kinds of disclaimers on things that cause us health issues as a community, that we understand, you know, there's certain things that we may be susceptible to. And as such, we should look out for those kinds of things and look at indicators of, you know, too much pork may cause high blood pressure, too much this may cause that, you know, kind of just put out, you know, promote wellness. So I think it's marketing, healthcare, and it's also promoting wellness. Two big areas that I think would help. And that way, in the future, when some of these events come across, you know, again, if we have some of those drive-by health events, and maybe use our churches, our local gathering places as places, alternate places to me going to the clinic, public health. If you come to a local church and offer those services, that would be totally helpful.
Yes, I think we would all agree. Before we turn it back over to Mr. Martin, I just want to remind everyone that in Dover, the 2 Walgreens where you can be tested are on State Street and in Magnolia on Birdie Lane. Those are the 2 Walgreens sites in Dover. Go ahead, Mr. Martin.
Will I get a chance to chime in? I just wanted to know about that particular health question. I just wanted to make sure.
Absolutely. Please, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, can I do it now? Okay.
Yeah, right
All
now.
right. Okay, thank you. Because there were a couple of things I support what each of my panelists have said to make sure that we don't miss some other things that are really important because we're voting. And one is that we have to expand um, Obamacare because it was never expanded. The Affordable Care Act was never tweaked enough so that it could be extremely effective. And so after it was passed, you have the second part of it to try to make it where it would be more conducive for everyone. So I think one of the things that's really important, because of course, just to say quickly, the Senate, for example, changed. And so the help that Obama had to get it through. After that, there was no more work on the Affordable Care Act. So there are some things in the Affordable Care Act that need to be protected, like pre-existing conditions. So to me, we have to work on getting legislatures and other people who want to expand or even work on the Affordable Care Act to make it actually work. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is that DEMCO currently works on substance abuse prevention activities, and I think more nonprofit organizations can also, and community centers, we can do testing, but we also have to deal with alcohol, drug abuse, substance abuse prevention, all those kinds of things. And so I think nonprofit organizations can also apply for these block grants and other funds that are available to actually provide some of these services in our community. And so I just wanted to make sure we mentioned that. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about real quick was I think we have to deal in the African-American community. Mental health is like a stigma, but a lot of African-Americans struggle from, a varying degree of trauma. Okay. And so it is important for us to also talk about things that have to do with mental health. It could be forums just to take the stigma away. These are the kinds of things that I think we just need to begin to put to the forefront. And I think all of those things would then help with health disparities so that even when COVID is over and done, we'll still, have these things that we still have to address. COVID is just exacerbated, like they said, the problem. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And, we've got some topics to discuss, but as I'm listening to you all with your wonderful responses, I just feel it's almost like braiding. It's a topic, but then somehow it pulls together into another topic. And somewhere there are solutions that you all have come up with, and some of them may help address others. To that end, what I'd like to do is I want to jump into something that's important because you all have started talking about health as well. Let's talk about environmental justice. So there was a report on environmental justice for Delaware in 2017. It revealed that people of color and those living in poverty are located more often in communities which are exposed to disproportionately higher levels of environmental pollution than whites or people not living in poverty. 60% of Delaware's population gets their water from wells. Mountain Air is among the poultry companies that has been cited for polluting water through a recent settlement to 100 families, and the company claimed no wrong in contaminating the water. Now, water is life, and water can be poisoned and water can die, and it is absolutely essential to life. What I want to do is I'm going to toss out a question. This is going to be more, stick your hand up if you want to go first, because we can all see one another, and we'll let the panelists decide, step up and go first or yield to someone else. My question is, dealing with environmental justice, do you have a plan or an idea to address the inequity that exists with the environmental disparities? And keep in mind, here's one that cuts across. This is heavily poverty related because it affects people of any color if they are impoverished. Who wants to go first? I think I saw Mr. Kufariji's.
So, thank you. The Mountaineer story is actually quite interesting because I used to work at DENREC, and so I'm quite familiar with that as far back as 2005, 6, somewhere thereabouts. But ultimately, I think there are rules in place to address the problems. I think what it comes down to is how enforcement is managed. Because sometimes, guess what companies look at? They look at the dollars, right? And they look at the bottom line. So let's say the punishment for me to dump my crap in Silver Lake is $10, but I can make $200 if I don't have to go to the dump in Sandtown. Guess what I'm gonna do? $10. It saves me $200. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm gonna dump it and you can find me. So that basically is sometimes the worst problem, is that the punishment, I'm probably not using the most perfect phrase to describe that. The punishment is too easy, that it's cheaper to just take the punishment and move on than to actually do the right thing. So if we're going to address this, then the people that are making our legislators, which I would like to be one, is to be able to say, hey, I can't let you get off with paying $10 because you make $200 if you don't follow the rules. The is not matching the crisis that you're creating. So what we need to do is to say, hey, if you're going to dump your mess in the wrong place where we've not told you can't dump, and you know you're dumping there, guess what? I need to issue you a $500-600 punishment. But much more than that, though, at the end of the day, I just don't let you keep on doing it. I need to actually, make you follow the rules that we've established. So it's not like we need to make more rules in this case. We just need to make sure that the punishment that comes with the poor choices you make are adequate for the crime you've committed.
Wow, thank you so much for that. Who else wants to hop in on that? While you all,
I don't know if you could see me waving my hand, John. I was waving my hand.
Okay, so yes.
It's okay. So I actually have an agricultural background. My dad was a farmer for all my life. And I've lived here in Dover for, goodness, 47 years. I had to do the math, but we've always had a little piece of land somewhere that we farmed. And one of the things that I learned in recent years, particularly down in Sussex County, the poultry industry, that whole conversation has to deal with the waste of the chickens. And so when the waste is removed, traditionally, that's just turned over in the soil, which caused the nitrate level to rise in the soil, which ultimately put too many nitrates in the well water and ultimately contaminated the water. So one of the solutions that one of the chicken industry giants, I'm not sure which one it was, but they took those and they had them processed into pellets and then shipped them out of the state. So that needs to be a standard. If we have too many nitrates in the soil, then that type of processing needs to have the cost attributed to the poultry industry because they're creating the problem. The other piece of that is that there are not supposed to be so many chicken growers with that chicken houses in a certain radius and proximity. I think that we had a situation arise where there was too many of them in a location, and that contributed as well. So to Ade's point, there is a piece of this that has to be allocated towards penalizing people who bend the laws and the rules in a favorable way to them, but an unfavorable way to the people who are having to deal with this issue. You left the question earlier about the health disparities. This is another branch of that of course, and we see where a lot of people of color are employed in some of these chicken processing plants. And so, you know, they're seeing more of the issues, especially in multi-generational households, and the economics that goes into this puts people in a position where the haves and the have-nots, the ones who are able, they have the water filtration systems. I have 3 of them in my home. So here in the city of Dover, I have the main filtration system that all my water goes through, and then I have the reverse osmosis at my sink, and then by the time it gets over to my refrigerator, it goes through another filter before I put my cup under and get some beautiful clean water. You know, some people just don't have that resource, and so it always comes down to the dollar sign. So if we've seen where there is an attributable cause, then the penalty also needs to include that the communities that are most affected by this, they need to have some water filtration put into their homes to be able to offset that.
Thank you so much. I'm going to tweak the question a little bit because there's an economic piece, but I'm just going to toss this out and maybe we'll get 1 or 2, and then I'm going to turn it back over to the good Reverend.
Okay.
We talked about the economic impact, but let's talk about the ethics of it. As aspiring leaders, okay, leaders in the community and aspirants to offices, what can you do? How can you use your leadership to address this from an ethical standpoint?
I want to jump in. One of the things that I think is extremely important is environmental justice, but and I want to say, especially when it comes to education. One of the things I didn't really know that this was so important until I ended up working on Capitol Hill, and there was an African American, a friend, it was a colleague, and we were both, working and stuff. And my issue was something else that I was hired to lobby and create, create legislation, create things around. And so that's what I was doing. And this Black guy, I was so surprised that he said, well, I'm here because I'm trying to work on environmental issues. And that's when I first realized that I had to actually look at where there are neighborhoods of color and see if there are power plants, toxic waste dumps around these various areas. That's why later on, I started really looking at things such as DuPont, and actually reading a lot about their history of dumping chemicals in various areas in the Newcastle County area. And so for me, and of course the movie Dark Waters, talks about that. So for me, I think the biggest things is education first. We have to really educate the population about environmental justice concerns. Danielle has an agricultural background, so she would be, a natural fit to discuss this. But what about a lot of the other people in the community that don't have that kind of background, that don't even realize that there are certain areas that have considerable amounts of toxins and carcinogens, and the people who have bought houses don't even know that they're living in those areas. So for an ethical standpoint, we have to begin to look and address some of these concerns. And I think also we need to hold these various businesses accountable, and enforcement agencies. We know right now they've gutted the EPA, so you don't have as many even enforcement officers to come to a place like Delaware, for example. And then even here, we're a Democratic state, so we're doing some work on it, but there needs to be a lot more done. But you already talked about the other elephant in the room, which was money. So I just wanted to make sure that, one, that we look at educating people of color through 4-H programs, through after-school programs, all of that stuff. Thank you. And thanks for the question. That was a great question. Great question.
Look, thank you. I was just sitting here right here marveling at the breadth of knowledge sitting right here virtually at the table. So I'm going to thank each of you. I don't know if anyone else wanted to do a quick follow-up, because if not, if you really are burning to do it, let me know. If not, We've got another topic coming up with the good Reverend Pam Connolly.
John, can I add one comment before you move on real quick?
Absolutely.
To speak to Leandra's point, we really need to, again, have somebody culturally competent to represent our issues on this piece. The current leadership that's been appointed to head our issues is not a person of color. How can you represent me and you don't know me? We got to have people in office yet again that can speak to the plight within our communities from that perspective. I just wanted to add that little quick thing.
Right on. Thank you. So we're going to turn it over to Reverend Pam Connolly.
Okay, so our next topic, and we'll just ask one or two of you who, as Brother John said, have a burning desire to address this, is about incarceration. Statistics say that 23% of Delaware's population is African American, but in 2017, 60% of the inmates in the state were African American. Also of note, Delaware has something like the second highest recidivism rate in the country. So we're all aware of the injustice often of the justice system, the school to prison pipeline and all of those kind of things. How do we make a dent? How do we make a change? How do we change mindsets, not only in our community, but in law enforcement and public policy, so that these numbers can turn around and so that we're not so disproportionate in the justice system and the prison system. All right, Reverend Marshall.
You guys are hitting all the things that I think are important, so I'm just going to put mine out here, then we can go for it. Well, there are two things that I just want to make sure that we look at. First of all, is supplier diversity. There's supplier diversity and creating of small businesses. When you working in a community and you see so many males that have, if they can sell drugs and they can weigh product and they can do all the math and things that go along with that, that they can be educated. So education, skills, the career and technical programs, all of that needs to be funded more. But also what's important is, they may not want to go to college, but they may have a good idea to create a business. So we need more entrepreneurship, classes, courses for these types of individuals, so that they could create their own, ways to make money. And one of the things that, is really something that I think we need to address is the supplier diversity office, because right now they have not put someone in charge. I think it's just you have someone acting, but we need somebody that's going to look in that office and then begin to look at businesses, minority businesses, and be able to give the incentives and help with the, money. And then once they get, say, contracts, when they're giving out contracts and things, that they should be made to make sure that they have a certain percentage of African Americans on each of these jobs, especially if it's federal money. And, we need to have a better relationship with supplier diversity, the whole supplier diversity office. And when you look at the amount of money and loans that are given to small businesses, when it comes to Black businesses, the problem is capital. And why is that problem capital? For a number of reasons. It's very difficult for them to get money from commercial banks. So a person who comes out of prison that says, well, they can't go to college because if you have felonies, it's hard to get financial aid, but they may be able to start a business. But then when they go to try to get capital, then it's difficult for them to get capital, and it becomes a vicious cycle. That's the reason why you have so many people that are they begin to just sell drugs again or do something because they got to feed their families. So I just want to make sure that we look at that, the education, particularly career apprentice, but also entrepreneur. And then the last thing is affordable housing. You got to add affordable housing to the mix, because without affordable housing, you still, it forces people to go out. They don't have a job, so it forces them to go out and do things just to, keep a roof over their head. So I just wanted to, throw those various ideas out for your consideration. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Oops. Is there another panelist that wants to speak to that topic about incarceration?
I think I'd like to say something, Reverend Conley.
Wonderful.
So the released offenders that I am currently working with, it seems to be more of a systemic problem. And what I mean by that is, first of all, Delaware, I believe, has the most strictest rules when it comes to probation and parole, and violations of probation and parole. And a lot of the recidivism is a result of probation and parole violations. So, and a lot of that is a breakdown in communication between the different departments in the justice system that under probation and parole, since they're not talking to each other, there's a lot of redundancies as far as drug testing and where to report to, and you may satisfy over here, but they didn't send the results of whatever it was to another, to the probation officer. And so, it just gets conglomerated, and then, with the capiases that are out there because of failure to appear, and the communication breakdown because the information didn't get passed down to an individual to know they were supposed to show up in court. And I think these are the things that need to be fixed. And for that matter, why does that warrant somebody to go back to prison for 3 years? I mean, some of that stuff is just ridiculous. So I think we can, in addition to what Leandra was saying, we should look at the systemic rules and violation penalties that are happening, that somebody who had served their time in prison, they can't even land on both feet because these violations and so many different rules that are in the probation and parole system won't allow them to just about do anything when they're even trying to go to work and they're trying to maintain a household and take care of their children. They just can't. And I think, I know the ACLU is already looking at that. They're doing studies about it. And I think we should take a page out of some other state's playbook, and we could reduce our recidivism rates just by looking at that.
Thank you so much for that. So what we're going to do now is, in order to try to make sure that everybody gets a chance to address the few little topics we have left, we're going to just kind of simplify it. There's a big impact. COVID has had an impact economically and socially and politically. Now, that's a pretty big topic, but what we're looking for is a 60-second response. Now, I'm going to call on each of you, but I'm going to offer you about just a 10-second head start for the first person to be able to speak.
I'll take it.
All right, then.
So my platform really centers around effective government. But first of all, COVID has brought to light things that were already existing long before the pandemic ever hit. And it's a shame that we had to go through this epic disaster called COVID to bring light to things that were already problematic in communities of color. We definitely need to make sure that we get good education reform. We definitely need to make sure that we have job growth, and we definitely need to have people in office who have a business acumen and can articulate in an economic development plan how we move forward, because in all fairness, our economy was not healthy long before COVID hit. I'm off my soapbox.
That was awesome. Mr. Satchel. Mr. Satchel.
You're on mute.
I agree with you there, Danielle. Pre-COVID, the economy seems to be doing great. Delaware unemployment numbers were still high. There's an issue there. And we do need people with an economic background to help us get out of this. We still have small businesses that haven't been able to reopen and are struggling to stay open. And these are people's livelihoods. And we need a solution to that. You know, everyone was affected by this, and people are still unemployed. We need to find a way to bring small businesses into Delaware for people to be employed. And when your nation is, if 49 out of 50 states our unemployment numbers are down, then that should tell you we have a problem. And we need to find a solution. And we do, piggybacking off of Danielle, we need people and it's people of color. And the numbers have shown it, that are unemployed. So that really tells you that something's not being done here.
Right on. Thank you so much, Mr. Satchel. Mr. Kufariji.
Yes, I think one of my biggest reasons for running has to do with a little bit of what Ms. Hall said around efficiency, government efficiency. I'm passionate. I'm passionate about good financial management. I'm sure Mr. Martin knows that. You know, making sure that things are set correctly, and that includes. And I hear talk about small businesses, but we also have big businesses that we try to bring into the state that we also hand out major incentives to. And I think we need to manage those processes, because I know, you know, we offer them tax breaks, but when you offer tax breaks, that means you're giving up revenue. And sometimes it pans out well, sometimes it doesn't. It hasn't panned out recently, in my personal opinion. I haven't seen it really pan out as well. COVID certainly didn't help the situation at all. So I think, good fiscal management, good input from everybody, especially, again, people representing the various communities that we have would certainly help to address the situation. So. You're on mute, sir.
Reverend Marshall.
Okay, I'll be real brief. One, I wanted, when it comes to this topic, there are a couple things that I think are important, and I just wrote them down. One was, when it comes to banks, we have to hold banks accountable for not giving loans to, well, I'll just put it this way, for biased lending. Okay, we need to hold them accountable so that we can have more small businesses that germinate from our community. And then if there are things that are needed, and they notice that they are not, they're not giving a lot of loans to people of color, then it doesn't stop a bank, a community bank or commercial bank from creating programs that helps to work with small businesses to get them to the point where they're able to receive funding. One of the issues with COVID for small businesses, there were some who had relationships with commercial banks, so they were able to get the money that was available to, that were available to the small businesses. Others were not able to get that money. So it's extremely important to make sure that happens. The other thing that's important, is this like lack of programs where we are teaching entrepreneurship. We need more programs teaching entrepreneurship and how we transform our skills to what we call MSEs, just strong, small, managed enterprises. We have to begin to teach our people these kinds of things because, that'll help during the time of COVID if we already had our businesses and things in place and the commercial banks knew that they had to give us a certain amount of money so that our businesses could stay afloat. But in Delaware, a lot of our businesses went under. And I just want to make sure that I mention that. Thanks.
I thank you for that. Mr. Rocha, 60 seconds, sir.
Okay, could you just repeat the question so that I know I'm on track?
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Actually, I'm going to restate it and throw a twist in. Obviously, COVID has affected us. It has had a tremendous economic impact, but I also mentioned that there was a social impact and a political impact. Now, because you are a newly elected, newly minted member of the city of our city government, I want to ask you, what aspect of your leadership will you contribute to addressing the political fallout from COVID and the social fallout from it?
It's right here.
I mean, that's a good question. Thank you for that. And I guess I'll answer it like this. We just need to be conscious of our community. Our community needs us more now than ever. I'm a believer that, COVID is not going to last forever. I think if we all just mask up and do the right things following the CDC guidelines, we can overcome COVID and start to, get back to normal. But we just have to make sure that, our citizens remain safe as possible, and then, continue to work with our citizens and build relationships so that we know what the needs are and we can work in real time to help them out. We still have a lot of issues where we have to work with a change in legislation and stuff of that nature. And but the panic is real. The people are hurting and they're suffering right now. So what can we do? And the only way to find out exactly what those needs are is keeping our communication lines open, making sure that we are reaching out and trying to get our finger on the pulse of what's really going on and trying to help as many individuals as we can, and not be afraid to reach out and help all of our citizens, because, it's a broad spectrum. I can tell you that now for anyone running for public office right now, it's a broad spectrum of issues that you have to deal with. It's almost like wearing different hats every time you take a phone call of someone with a complaint. So just brace yourself for that. Be a good listener and take the time to help and provide resources whenever you can.
All right. Thank you so much. So we have a couple of questions that were submitted in the chat by some of those persons who are watching and with us. So I'm going to ask the question, and we'll just ask for one person, whoever raises their hand first, because we're about at 10 minutes left to respond to this question. The first question: how do we get funding for paraprofessionals who want to become teachers?
Can they expand on that question? How do we get funding for paraprofessionals that want to be teachers? Yeah, they need to clarify that question. I don't know that that's a question that can be answered as is.
Well, that's how it was submitted. I would suspect they're looking for, maybe are there programs already in place, or can there be development of programs that will assist those persons who are already paraprofessionals who want to move to the next level and become, a full-fledged teacher in the classroom.
All right. So a lot of school districts also.
I have that in my faith. There is no perfect person. Only one, and as far as I know, he's never run for office. I've never seen Jesus Christ's name on a ballot. If I do, I'll be sure.
Oh, sorry. I was wondering where that song was coming from. Sorry. Yeah, so paraprofessionals, a lot of school districts will always offer tuition assistance. So if you've been employed in a school district, you meet certain requirements for tuition assistance. A lot of districts will offer tuition benefits to staff, which will help them, progress in their career, which help move you from being a paraprofessional to a teacher. I know Capital School District does that. So that would be the support that's available at least from Capital.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. The next question, how do we get Black history in the classroom? More Black history taught in the classroom. It's another education question. Anybody?
Yes, I'll take the question because
Okay.
on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock, I teach African American experience. And so for me, one of the things is just to explain that Black history is American history. And when is American history as well. So when we study American history and we leave out African American history, we're leaving out a part that is extremely important. Also, it's important if we look at it historically, the first 19 people who came here that were so-called the first African Americans in 1619. When you look at it from that standpoint, we were actually, African Americans were actually a part of the process even prior to, July 4th, 1776. We were here, prior to all those things. Even during the Articles of Confederation, we were making a contribution. And I think it's important for us when we talk about African American experience, African American history, we need to approach it from the fact that we're teaching students all of the contributions that other people have made to the creation of America, and we're leaving out the group that was there even prior to the Articles of Confederation. So how do you leave that out of and you say you're educating people, and the other thing I want to just mention is K through 12 education. We don't have hardly any courses that deal with the contribution of African Americans, but we're saying that we're doing American history. That just doesn't make sense. And so I think we need educators to actually, begin to lobby, begin to talk to the DOE here, and begin to make a plausible case for those things in our curriculum, because it's important. You'll have some teachers who will teach it because they know the importance, and then the others who don't. And it's important for not just for African Americans, but it's for everyone. We talk about cultural competence. You can't have cultural competence when you only teach partial history. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Amen.
Thank you so much. We have one more question that was submitted that we do want to get to. So we just need one response so we can give all of you an opportunity to give some very brief closing remarks. And this third question is again about education. How can we recruit more teachers of color?
You have to show the importance of education at younger age. Again, this is one of those things, we can't grow teachers overnight. So we need to show the value of education to our young children to make sure that they take education seriously and show them the benefits of being an educator. Again, I think financial incentives to support high school students that may want to go into teaching will be very important. Being able to offer them scholarships, help pay for their education will be totally necessary to increase the number of teachers of minority that we have.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for that. So it's amazing how quickly time flies. I know at the beginning it seemed like we had all day. Can I get you all to agree? Right?
Yes, yes.
All right. So this last response belongs solely to our panelists here. Just want to give you a chance. First, thank you on behalf of my co-hosts and our sponsors. Thank you all for sharing your time and yourselves with us.
Yes.
In closing, I want to say in 2 minutes or less, explain how you are uniquely prepared to help the citizens of Kent County.
I want to go first because my race is already over. So I just want to say something. I guess I want to tweak your question just to say and answer it this way. I just want to answer it this way. Politics is local. And so what I want to say is that when we look at our candidates, each of our candidates, we got to look at their track record. We got to look at what they do in the community. And then we have to determine if they are a good fit for their, whatever that they're running for. I think sometimes we're too partisan and we do not actually look at the actual person and their qualifications and what they can bring to the table. Not saying that there's not a room for partisanship, but I'm the type of person I believe in country first and America first in that regard. So I think we need to look at each candidate and make sure that they have the qualifications that are necessary in that area and that meet our agenda. And number two, the other thing is, I forgot to mention something that's extremely important. When we take the license from people because of non-child support and all those kinds of things, what happens is that's a public policy issue that then begins to transcend all of the issues that we've talked about, because transportation becomes a big issue, for people of color and particularly for Black men. So I wanted to make sure that we mentioned that, because we didn't mention the taking of the license. And that's something that it may help in child enforcement, but it hurts the Black community disproportionately. And so I'm unique because I enjoy politics and I want to see us succeed as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna turn to Mr. Welton Satchel. Mr. Satchel, you're closing.
All right, here I am. I think what makes me unique is that, and why I'm running for office, is that I'm a listener, because I believe that the only way you can solve a problem, you have to listen to people who are actually dealing with the current situation. Sometimes we don't listen a lot. We think we know it all, but to just take time out to actually listen to the voters and your constituents, to know what they're going through and what they're currently dealing with. We don't have all the answers. In order for us to be effective, we have to listen. And we go wrong at times when someone alluded to earlier that we're not out there in the community, and we need to be out in the community so we can hear the issues of what the people who are electing us and voted for us, because they want answers. But at the same time, they want answers. They also want you to take time out and listen. And it's a sad thing. I think it's very sad when you don't know who your councilman is, or you don't know who your legislator is, or who your levy court commissioner is, because you don't know, because they're not out there enough for you to know. And when you're not out there, that means you're out of touch.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be seen. Hey, the ones who ran for office and ones who are currently running, guess what? Our butts are out there right now because we want to be seen and we want to be recognized, and we want people to see us and hear us out, because guess what? We want their vote come November. So if we can show our face every 2 to 4 years we decide to run, we should be able to show our faces when we're not running for anything. And we have to put the work in.
Thank you, Satchel. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but 60 seconds. It's all we have left because we're on someone else's platform, and we have to be, respectful of the fact that they've given us this time. We've got going to swing over to. Well, I'll let you all jump in and say who's next, but I'm going to keep the clock 60 seconds. Who's next?
I'll go.
All right.
So the reason why I decided to run, it's not my first time running for state office. I ran for Senate in 2018. And the things that drew me to politics was the fact that as a mother of 10 children, my needs were going unmet. As a business owner, my needs were going unmet. I'm a disabled veteran. I should have had access to a wealth of resources to make my life work. And I couldn't find them outside of digging and clawing and scraping. And if you know my background, you know that I've had issues where I had been single parent and on in public housing. And I'm the epitome of you can do it and you can make it. In school with 8 children on the dean's list, getting my first home with resources. It shouldn't be that hard. We need people who have boots on the ground, have been there, done that, have a testimony, and are willing to share it and be able to bring some perspective to policy that's able to affect people's bottom line socioeconomically so that all people can prosper. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. All right, we have two more candidates left. Who's next?
I'll go next. Yes, I'm like Ms. Hall. I'm running for office because I'm a people guy. I want to be there to speak for people in those back rooms where the decisions are being made. Because when they come out in front of you in public, the deal is already done. I want to be out there. I want to be in that back room when they're saying, should we increase minimum wage or not? Well, it's going to support people. It's going to help people. I'm a people guy. I want to make sure that I temper that also with the idea that I know we have to have some fiscal responsibility and fiscal balance. So I'm a fiscal guy as well. I think the experience that I bring is over 27 years of state government experience. I've been in every major agency. I understand policy. I know policies are in place to do certain things. Sometimes it's about getting out and actually implementing and doing those things. But absolutely, we need to make sure that we're listening to people. We're removing obstacles from people's ways so that they can go forth and prosper. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I guess going last is a man who represents the first state and represents the first fraternity, Mr. Gerald Roche.
Thank you, John. So I guess what makes me unique would be just my background alone. Growing up in a diverse community in a town similar to this in Long Island, New York, a town called Riverhead, and spending 20 years in the Air Force and meeting people from all across the world and having to, Danielle could tell you, when you're in the Air Force and you're supervising airmen, you can't fire anybody. You just have to learn how to work with them. And I've had plenty of experiences in that. And, it allowed me to take and meet people where they are. And as Welton said, you have to be a good listener. So I'm here to listen. I'm here to take on and write down and jot whatever issues that are out there, and I'm prepared to tackle those issues. And that's what I think I can bring, in my in my term in city council.
Wow, thank you so much. So we're going to turn it over now to my co-host who has been fantastic work with you. You are a leader, quiet leader. Most people might not know that, but you are the president of the Dover Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. And there's so many things that you do throwing up the MIDI. And so many things you do, such quiet leadership, a study in that. And so I want to turn it over to you to bring us home. So Reverend Pamela Connolly, thank you. And the floor is all yours.
All right. Thank you so much, John Martin Jr. I've appreciated the opportunity to work with you as well. We want to thank all of our panelists. We thank you for your time, your participation. This has been wonderful for me. Some of you I knew by name, some not, but now I know more. And that's what's important, so that people can get to see who you are and what you stand for. We do just want to advise those who are participating, there'll be another event similar to this in Newcastle County. And the date for that is on the screen, is October the 12th from 5 to 8. We want to thank Miss Alicia Clark for sort of bringing us together and organizing this. Also, Mr. Calvin Jackson, who's our behind the scenes technical person who's keeping us all running here. And again, of course, our sponsors who were mentioned at the beginning. We do want to say to all of the panelists, for those of you who were victorious in your endeavors, we wish you well and congratulations, and we'll be looking forward to see what you're doing. For those of you who were not victorious, we certainly thank you for even taking the opportunity to putting yourself out there to be a candidate, because that's how we even get an opportunity, or even an opportunity to even get in the game. And for those of you who are still participating in the process, again, we wish you well. I think this is great for people to get to see your face, to hear your some of your platform, and get to see who you are and understand who you are. And so with that said, again, we thank you. It's a Friday evening, it's still early. And so whatever it is that you have planned to do, continue to be safe. And most importantly, whatever else we do in the next 39 days, I guess now, we must vote, 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 and get our families and friends and our circles of influence to vote. That's the most important thing that we can do this year. And again, thank you all and have a good night.